Came in at 2047 in the morning, Portland time. I know the exact time because I've been awake anyway, sitting cross-legged on my apartment floor in Seoul with a cup of cold tea, trying to finish a quarterly compliance report for a client. That's what I do. I'm a forensic accountant. I trace money. I find things people try to hide. I spent 6 years learning how to follow a financial paper trail through shell companies, falsified invoices, and offshore transfers. I'm good at it. My boss tells me I have a gift for pattern recognition, that I see things other people's eyes just slide right past. I did not see this one coming. The email was from my mortgage servicer. A routine notification, the kind I'd set up to forward automatically to a secondary inbox I checked maybe once a week. But something made me open it. Maybe it was the subject line. Maybe it was the timestamp. Maybe it was just instinct. The same instinct that makes me stop on a spreadsheet and say, wait, something's wrong here. The subject line said, confirmation of payoff, account closed. I read it 3 times. Then I sat very still for about 40 seconds, which is a long time to sit completely still. Then I opened my banking app. Then my county property records portal. Then I just stopped. Closed the laptop. Pressed my palms flat against the floor. My house. My house in Beaverton, Oregon. The one I'd bought at 29 with 11 years of savings and a down payment I'd been building since my first internship, had been sold, deed transferred. Mortgage paid off with the sale proceeds. Transaction recorded 14 days ago. I had not sold my house. Let me back up, because there are things you need to understand about how I ended up in Seoul, and about my brother, and about the specific kind of trust that only exists between siblings who grew up broke together. My name is Nadia. I'm 32. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Gresham, Oregon with my mom, my younger brother Colt, and a rotating cast of financial crises. My dad left when I was 11. My mom worked doubles at a hotel laundry facility until her back gave out. Then she switched to dispatch work, then she got laid off, then she picked herself back up and did it again. She was not a warm person. Stress does that to people. But she was honest, and she worked hard, and she raised 2 kids who understood that nothing comes for free. Colt and I were close in the way siblings are, when they've shared a room for 8 years and eaten a lot of peanut butter sandwiches together. He's 4 years younger than me. Smart. Genuinely smart. The kind of smart that made his teachers notice him. The kind that got him a partial scholarship to Oregon State. He dropped out after 1 semester. Said college wasn't for him. Said he had ideas. Colt always had ideas. Over the years, those ideas took the shape of a food truck that never launched. A drop-shipping business that lost money for 8 months before he quit. A consulting venture he couldn't explain clearly. And then, most recently, day trading. Crypto, options, penny stocks. He'd call me sometimes to tell me he'd had a good week. I'd ask him to send me his portfolio spreadsheet. He never did. When I got the Seoul assignment 2 years ago, a 18-month forensic engagement for a U.S. firm's Korean subsidiary, I asked Colt if he'd be willing to house sit. Not manage, not rent out, just be there. Water the plants. Keep the pipes from freezing. Let the neighbor's kid collect the mail. In exchange, he could live there rent-free, save some money, get back on his feet. He cried a little when I offered. Said I was the only one who ever believed in him. I should have recognized that for the red flag it was. I set everything up properly, or so I thought. I gave him a key. I gave him the alarm code. I paused the automatic bill pay and set up a separate account he could draw from for utilities, a fixed amount per month, nothing more. I did not give him power of attorney. I did not add him to the deed. I did not give him any legal authority over the property whatsoever, because even then, even with all the love and history between us, I was a forensic accountant. I understood what financial access meant. I understood the difference between trust and exposure. What I didn't account for was a notary in Multnomah County who was willing to stamp a document she shouldn't have stamped, for a fee she shouldn't have accepted. I didn't call Colt that night in Seoul. It was almost 3 in the morning, and my hands were shaking, and I knew, the way I know things professionally, that I needed to gather information before I made any contact. Accusations without documentation are just noise. I needed to be quiet. I needed to think. I pulled up the county recorder's website and downloaded the deed transfer. The signature on the seller line was mine. My full legal name, Nadia Renee Okafor, in handwriting that was close enough to fool a cursory glance but wrong in 3 specific ways I could identify immediately. The notary seal was real. I checked your license number, still active, still registered. The power of attorney document attached to the transfer was dated 8 months ago. I had been in Seoul 8 months ago. I had meant signed a power of attorney document. The buyer was a man I'll call the purchaser. I don't have reason to name him here. He was a victim too, in his way. He paid $567,000 for a house I'd bought at $410,000 and put another $40,000 into. He'd been living there for 2 weeks. His kids had probably started unpacking their rooms. I sat with that for a while. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and started building a timeline. By 6 a.m., Seoul time, I had a clear picture. Colt had listed the house through a real estate agent who apparently did not dig deeply enough into the seller's authorization documents. The notary had authenticated the forged POA. The title company, and this is where it got interesting, had issued title insurance, which meant the purchaser was protected. He would not lose his home and he would not have to pay twice. That was the one thing in this entire disaster that wasn't a catastrophe. But my brother had walked away with $567,000 in sale proceeds, minus the mortgage payoff of around $198,000, minus agent commissions and closing costs. He'd netted somewhere in the neighborhood of $320,000. And according to the 3 months of Venmo records I pulled up on his public profile, yes, he'd left it public. He had spent a significant portion of it very, very fast. There were payments to a crypto exchange. There were payments to someone listed only as DK Ventures. There were restaurant charges I recognized from Portland's Pearl District, the kind of places where entrees start at $40. There was a payment to a jeweler in Lake Oswego. A jeweler. I stared at that one for a long time. I booked a flight home 4 days later. I didn't tell my brother. I didn't tell my mother. I told my employer that I had a family emergency, which was technically accurate, and that I would need 2 weeks of emergency leave. Then I called my attorney, a woman named Hartwell who specializes in real estate litigation, and who I had, fortunately, worked with on a previous case. I laid out everything I had. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Nadia, you have a very clean case. And you're lucky the title insurance is in play because your buyer is protected. Now we just need to make sure you are too." "I want criminal charges," I said. She didn't hesitate. "Then we go to the DA." I spent those 4 days in Seoul doing what I do. I pulled every financial record I could legally access. I documented the forged POA, cross-referencing the notary's log, which is public record, against the claim date of signing. I found the notary's name had also appeared on 2 other flagged documents in an unrelated fraud case from 3 years prior. I contacted the Oregon State Bar to ask about the real estate agent's license history. I built a package. I have done this professionally for 6 years, and I have testified in court as an expert witness 4 times. I know how to build a package. When I landed at PDX, I went directly to my attorney's office. I did not go to my house, the house that was no longer legally mine, though we were in the process of reversing that. And I did not go to my mother's apartment, where I had reason to believe my brother was staying. I sat in Hartwell's conference room for 3 hours, and we went through everything together. Then she called the DA's office, and I gave my statement. The arrest warrant was issued 6 days after I landed. But before the warrant was served, something happened that I want to tell you about, because it is the part I think about most. My mother called me on a Wednesday evening. I was staying in a hotel, a very modest one, because my home was in legal limbo and I was not spending money carelessly while I waited. And I had just ordered room service and was sitting on the bed with my laptop when her name came up on my phone. I answered, because she's my mother. She didn't open with hello. She said, "Nadia, you need to drop this." I asked her what, specifically, she wanted me to drop. She said, "You know what? You're going to destroy this family over money." I said, "He forged my signature and sold my house." She said, "He needed help, and you were gone. What was he supposed to do?" I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment, because it wasn't rage. Not right away. It was something colder. A kind of settling, like watching a solution clarify in a beaker. All the sediment falling away and leaving something transparent and still. I had suspected, somewhere in the back of my mind, that my mother might have known. Or not known exactly, but known enough. Known that Colt was doing something with the house. Known that something was happening and chosen not to ask questions. "He could have called me," I said. "He could have asked." "You were never available," she said. "You were always busy, always working, and he was struggling and the house was just sitting there." It wasn't just sitting there. He was living in it. For free. "Nadia." Her voice shifted, got quieter, which with my mother means more dangerous, not less. "He has a fiancé now. They're trying to start a life." "You want to put your brother in prison over a house?" That was when I found out about the fiancé and about the jeweler in Lake Oswego. I asked my mother to describe the engagement ring. She did. I did the math. I told my mother that I loved her and that I would not be dropping anything, and I hung up the phone. Here's what I want you to understand about the next part. I have been asked, since all of this came out, whether I feel guilty, whether I lie awake thinking about my brother in a holding cell, whether I wonder if I went too far. I don't, and I want to explain why, not to convince you, but because I think it matters. When my mother said just a house, she was describing $410,000 I saved over 11 years, working 60-hour weeks and skipping vacations and driving a 2009 Civic until the check engine light stopped turning off because I'd learned to ignore it. She was describing the first thing I had ever owned, the first place that was mine, that had my name on the deed and my paint colors on the walls and my grandmother's quilt on the spare bed. She was describing the thing I'd built so that when I came home from Seoul, I would have somewhere to come home to. It was not just a house. And Colt knew that. He knew it exactly because he'd helped me move in. He'd sat on my kitchen floor eating pizza with me the night I got the keys. He'd said, "I remember this precisely. You did it, Nadia. You really did it." He knew what it meant. He just decided that what it meant to him, $320,000 in his account, was more important. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Colt was arrested on a Friday morning. I know because Hartwell called me and told me, and I sat for a moment and said, okay, and then went back to the deposition prep I was working on, because I had gone back to remote work by then and there was a filing deadline. My mother did not call me that day. She called me 3 days later, and the conversation was short. She said she hoped I was satisfied. I said I was working on a settlement with my buyer through the title insurance process. She said that wasn't what she meant. I said I understood what she meant. She hung up. Colt's fiancée, a woman I had never met, who had apparently been told that Colt's sudden wealth came from a successful investment exit, reached out to me through Instagram. She said she didn't know. She said she was sorry. She said she'd returned the ring to the jeweler and was trying to get the money back, and that she wanted me to know she was done with him. I believed her. I wrote back and told her she deserved better, and that I was sorry too, because I was. She didn't ask for this either. The DA filed charges on 4 counts, forgery in the first degree, identity theft, theft by deception, and fraud in a real estate transaction. The notary faced separate licensing action and a civil suit. The real estate agent's license was under review for failure to verify seller authorization. The title insurance claim processed. My buyer kept his home. His name stayed on the deed. That part, at least, was clean. As for my house, the civil process to reverse the deed transfer took 4 months, because legal processes always take longer than they should. I stayed in my hotel longer than I planned. I watched my savings account in a way I hadn't had to since I was 23. But Hartwell was good at her job and the documentation was airtight, and eventually I got my keys back. The first night I slept in my own house again, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. I lay in my bed and looked at the ceiling and thought about the night Colt helped me move in. And I let myself feel that for a while. Because grief is not the same as regret. I could grieve the brother I thought I had and still know I did the right thing. Those two things can both be true at the same time. Colt pled guilty to 2 of the 4 counts in exchange for a reduced sentence, 18 months, with a restitution order for the remaining proceeds he hadn't spent, which, after the crypto losses and the Pearl District dinners and the ring and the DK Ventures payment that turned out to be a stake in someone's equally bad investment idea, amounted to about $67,000. Restitution orders are only as good as the person paying them, and we all know how that tends to go. But it's documented. It exists. Someday, if he ever gets his life together, there will be a legal record of what he owes. My mother and I speak occasionally, not warmly. She believes I chose my house over my family. I believe she watched her son commit a federal crime and asked me to absorb the cost. We've not found a way to reconcile those two positions, and I've stopped trying to find one. What I have found, and I want to say this clearly because I think it's the part that actually matters, is that the worst thing Colt did was not forge my signature. The worst thing he did was take something I had worked for and treat it as if my labor didn't count, as if the years I'd spent building something were just background noise, and what he needed in the present moment was the only thing that was real. I know people who have made that same calculation about me my entire life. I know women who have been told in 100 different ways that their work and their savings and their name on a piece of paper is somehow less legitimate than the immediate desires of the people around them. I know that story. I had been living it since I was a kid, watching my mother work doubles while my father's opinion of our situation was the only one that seemed to matter to anyone. I'm done being background noise. My name is on the deed. I am home. And if you are listening to this and you are somewhere in the middle of something like what I went through, the part where you haven't decided yet, the part where everyone is calling you and asking you to just let it go for the sake of the family, I want you to know your name matters. What you built matters. And for the sake of the family is not a reason to let someone take it. Call your attorney first. Call your family second. In that order and not the other way around. The thing I keep coming back to is the pizza. The night I got my keys, the first set, the real ones, the ones I'd earned, Colt sat on my kitchen floor and ate bad delivery pizza with me and said, "You did it." He meant it. I could tell he meant it, and that's the part that doesn't get easier with time, because it means he understood exactly what he was taking when he took it. I used to think betrayal required hatred, that someone had to despise you to do something like this. But Colt didn't hate me. He just decided that what he wanted was more urgent than what I'd built. That's almost harder to sit with, because there's no clean villain to file away. There's just a person who loved me and chose himself anyway, and a system of choices that compounded until a notary was stamping a document she shouldn't have touched, and my name was on a deed transfer I never signed. That's how it works, I think. It rarely happens all at once. It happens in small decisions. The first time someone lets themselves believe that your absence makes your property available, the first time a parent decides not to ask hard questions, the first time a stamp gets pressed without due diligence. Each one seems minor. Together, they're a crime. What got me through it wasn't anger, though the anger was there. What got me through it was the same thing that got me through 11 years of saving on an accountant's starting salary. Through 60-hour weeks and a check engine light I learned to ignore. Through building something real and a family that had mostly taught me that real things don't last. It was the understanding that your integrity is the one asset no one can forge a signature on. Colt could copy my handwriting. He could not copy the discipline that produced what he stole. I think about Nadia at 22 sometimes, the version of me who opened her first savings account for the house fund and set up an automatic transfer of $200 a month and told nobody because she didn't want to jinx it. That woman deserved what she built. She made the right calls, not just financially, but morally. She didn't cut corners. She didn't take what wasn't hers. She didn't ask her family to absorb her failures. And when someone violated that, she didn't absorb it quietly. She documented everything, engaged proper legal counsel, and let the system do what it exists to do. That's the thing I want to say to anyone who is in the middle of this right now. The part where your mother is calling and using words like family as if they're a currency you owe without limit. Integrity is not passivity. Doing the right thing is not the same as doing the quiet thing. Sometimes the most ethical choice you can make is to hold the line so clearly, so thoroughly, and with such complete documentation that there is no room left for anyone to rewrite what happened. I got my keys back. My name is on the deed again. I sleep in my own house, and I drink my coffee in my own kitchen, and I do not owe anyone an apology for that. What Colt lost, he lost by his own hand. What I kept the same way.